So I haven't eaten, and I've been having trouble thinking of words a lot during these. So this is the third try. But so I had Dr. Goals' class, Ashok Goals' class, the semester after he introduced Jill Watson. So Jill Watson, I don't know if it's true that AI is going to be more and more important in all aspects of life in the future, including education. I'm not so sure how important Jill Watson was, but she was really flashy at the time. So Jill Watson was an artificially intelligent teaching assistant on this forum called Piazza, which is kind of like a huge bulletin board system for a class when you have hundreds of students. And so there can be a lot of questions to answer, and it would be helpful to have somebody who's not human who can do it 24/7 all the time when you have this many questions. That's perhaps I can say from experience there were thousands and thousands. It's not like our discussion boards when I like put up a forum and say, hey, answer some questions. It's like people post not even just because they have to. Sometimes it's part of your grade. Most of the time it wasn't actually, and people would still post because it was your main way of sharing tips and knowledge and asking questions, clarifications for assignments and that sort of thing. I guess there's a critical mass at some point, I think, with that kind of thing. When you have just a class, for instance, ours is like somewhere between 40 and 50 students, not quite there, the critical mass for just discussing things. But anyway, Jill Watson is based on the supercomputer from IBM that won Jeopardy. So that's why I'm bringing this up. This is just an article on Business Insider about it. There's a few other articles I can show you. There's the page at Dr. Goals' page on it. Anyway, I had the same class, knowledge-based artificial intelligence, the semester after Jill Watson was introduced. So it wasn't Jill Watson anymore, but we'd already caught on. I can tell the story of Jill Watson briefly. People started getting suspicious around a few weeks into the semester. I forget how long, like maybe halfway. Some of the answers didn't seem quite human. Sometimes it was an answer to a totally different question. Like, did you not understand what I wrote? That sort of thing, right? So in the early days, ironing out the kinks, people started to maybe be suspicious that somebody wasn't human, one of the people who were posting on Piazza, and they figured it out. And then, of course, when we took the course, Jill Watson was already in the news, and so we expected to have an AITA, and it was a male name. I forget exactly what the name was. I want to say it was a Hispanic name, but they never would verify to us if we guessed correctly. But it was kind of obvious who it was when you're looking for it. It wouldn't have been obvious if we hadn't, because they got better from semester to semester, I've heard, but we were only semester 2. So there's several. He's really proud of it. So he's a great guy, by the way. I love him. He was one of my. Actually, all my professors were great. I can think of. Maybe one wasn't that great, but they were all pretty. But he was really fun. So of course, you can see it. There's the Vox did did an article on it. I wonder if this one's. Yeah, this seems kind of positive. I haven't seen any negative things about it. But so this is about AI, and that's why I'm talking about this. So I'm starting with this slide. Now, there's some other topics in this. Let me get it up here. 5. There we go. She also, not her, but Watson won Jeopardy, and I think was it Watson? No, Deep Blue. Deep Blue beat Kasparov, but same kind of thing, right? Big supercomputer AI won at chess, which is a huge accomplishment. I think Go has been won by AI. Maybe check into that. The game Go has a lot more combinatorial possibilities than chess does. So that uses something called deep search. Kind of just like do all the possible solutions, plan them out for each move, and then cut out using some heuristics, some that either ones that'll never happen because just of the path you're taking, these won't happen, or they're definitely loser branches. Everything below this point is going to be a loss, so cut that branch out. It's called alpha beta pruning is what it's called. What I'm talking about are artificial intelligence techniques. But before we talk about that, I'm going to talk about this briefly. This is I was in the middle of week 7 here. So the past couple of chapters are business oriented. They're not really my strength. I'm a computer science person. So that's why I want to talk to you a little bit about artificial intelligence and probably VI and AR. I mean, VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality a little bit too. Some of the things you do need to know from this, and I'll let you explore this yourself, but I know some of the things that are asked about in tests and stuff are one thing in particular. We're about to find it here is this business rules management system. This is a software you can buy for your company or whatever to help you adjust to changes more quickly. So if you were doing like a process where something in your supply chain management changes, business rules management system would help you adapt to that more quickly. There's a question about that. This is all businessy stuff. The AI stuff's the fun stuff. So getting back to AI. So computers with the ability to mimic or duplicate the functions of the human brain. There's some aspect of that, especially when you're talking about such things as neural networks and to some degree, depending on what you mean, knowledge-based AI. Some things don't work exactly like the human brain much at all, if you ask me. Some areas of machine learning, for example, are statistically, probabilistically based. And the human brain isn't great with probability. So there is an aspect of that kind of computation in the brain. But what I want to get at here is, and your reading discusses this a bit if you get into it and reading it, there's a lot of deep, wide-ranging areas that AI touches on. So as far as mimic or duplicate the human brain, I don't think so quite exactly. I mean, there are things you would call AI that have the intelligence of, like, having the intelligence of a roach, of an insect, is impressive for machines. So not necessarily even the human brain, but maybe you could say mimics the thinking or the ability to mimic the intelligence of insects even is impressive. So why am I making this point? It's because consciousness is a mystery. There are, of course, religious explanations for it, possibly, but as far as just based on hardcore science, it's a mystery. We don't know why consciousness exists. And consciousness is that whole, I mean, it's hard to define even, but it's that notion of self-awareness, that sense of being, having an ego, of being an I that's experiencing the world. There's hypotheses about how it works. The whole having a self model, say modeling, like a recursive modeling of yourself as you interact with the world. That's, even the Buddhists would say that could be consciousness itself could be an illusion. There's no such thing. And what does that even mean? So you get into some mysteries. And so what we're talking about here is not consciousness. When you're talking about AI, it's related. There's notions about it that you're forced to think about, but intelligence and consciousness are not necessarily the same thing. Intelligence is just the ability to, again, I think I've talked about this, but it means to read between a thing, basically it means to distinguish, like, this thing from the other thing. And you can write algorithms that do that and that appear to make choices and appear to learn. Appear to is the key word, because I mean they do. You have to admit that they are learning. That's the whole point of the Turing test, which was played out in a real life way, actually, in that knowledge based AI course, where you had the TA who was a machine. The Turing test, Alan Turing, the Albert Einstein of computer science. Very important figure. You might have seen The Imitation Game, Enigma, and Colossus, and all that. That's very important for World War II, figuring out how the Nazis encoded their messages, et cetera, et cetera. Very important. Not the most important thing that Alan Turing did. It's always disappointing when I see these movies, because that's the sexy story, because it's the war effort and all that. Alan Turing's most important because he laid the foundations formally for what computation is. And the machines that we use are based on his model, his mathematical model that called the Turing machine, which was, the picture he drew was of a read-write head and an infinite tape of cells that you write symbols on, and some kind of way of deciding which state you're in and what instructions you would give based on which state you're in and what you're reading and writing on the tape, the infinite tape. It's a very mechanical kind of a ticker tape, stock market ticker, which I was surprised. I had a friend never seen one before. I'm like, gosh, surely you've seen it in movies and cartoons, but it's a very mechanical, electromechanical picture. But the way he mathematically described how a Turing machine works is precisely how our computers work, with the difference that ours are, actual computers are finite in space. They don't have an infinite tape that they can write on, infinite ticker tape. And the time element is involved. You have steps in Turing machines, is how you determine how long something takes in quotes. So, but the steps don't have any specific measurement in time, like how many seconds. So you could imagine a Turing machine instantly calculating the answer, because there's no time in imagination necessarily, right? That's a physical world kind of thing. But that's why Alan Turing's important. He's the third thing he's sort of famous for. So there's that's the most important thing, that he laid down the mathematical foundations, formalized what it means for something to be computable with an algorithm. And you can look him up on that if you want to get into the math. That's something. Look up the Church-Turing thesis, because a guy named Alonzo Church actually worked on this in a different way. They both came at it at different angles and got the same solution, basically an equivalent solution about what's computable. What does it mean for something to be computable? That's the most important thing, because everything we do in computer science and the practical applications that come from that, all the machines and stuff that we use every day, depend on that understanding, that formalization. The second thing he's famous for is the breaking the Nazi Enigma encoding device and Colossus and all that. There's some personal life stuff I won't get into. He's sort of famous for too. And then there's the like sort of third thing is the Turing test, and this is his proposition about how to determine whether a machine is intelligent or not. And it's the class. There's lots of different ways this is represented, but essentially it's, you've got a double blind test where you've got a person with a keyboard on one side, or some way of writing and receiving messages, and on the other side there's some entity that you're communicating with. And after a certain amount of time, if you can't say for sure whether the entity on the other side is a machine or not, then you have to admit that it's intelligent to some degree. There are different versions of this. There's an actual Turing test. It's in your slides somewhere in the reading about sort of a competition. You have a panel of judges that have to decide whether. If you've ever talked to a chatbot, sometimes it's kind of hard to. After a while, you realize that it's not human. Same thing with this TA. After a while, they were like, "There's something fishy with this." Some of these responses from this certain name. That's the machine failing the Turing test. Apparently, it's never been passed. So, in the more formal competitions or whatever, where they've set up for it. But anyway, there's a long tangent about intelligence. Intelligence is machines being able to figure out problems in novel ways, based and I guess in a way that a human brain might approach it. But again, there's a guy named Roger Penrose, Dr. Roger Penrose, I think RIP. He sat in the same chair. I don't know if literally or not, but it's a position at Cambridge, I think, that Isaac Newton once sat in. I want to say it was Isaac Newton. He wrote a whole book about this called The Emperor's New Mind. I would suggest reading it sometime. But and it's people criticize it as well. But one of the main thesis of that is that using Alan Turing's formalization of computation and machines built on that, they will never be conscious. They might appear more and more to be intelligent, but they'll never be conscious. There's something about the human brain that is unique in that way and that we don't understand. So he had some kind of, in the second book anyway, he had some possible reason that he got into quantum stuff and very, small scale reasons. The way the nerves worked, some kind of tubules or something he talked about that might explain consciousness. But the thing is, it's a mystery. We don't know where it comes from. That was heavily criticized, by the way. And then you got into questions about what does it mean for something to be conscious? How do you know your friend sitting next to you is conscious? You don't really. So it opens up a bunch of questions. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about intelligence. So that's the appearance of being able to figure out problems, and especially novel ones. All right, so there was one slide and one big talk about AI. I just kind of want to fix the idea of what we're talking about. We're talking about AI in a larger context. We're not talking about the Matrix or Terminator or that kind of thing. In a way we are, but there's sort of the implication, I think, in those movies that those machines are conscious in a similar way that we are. But again, it's hard to even say that other people are conscious. So we'll go around and around circles on this. Anyway, so here's a picture apparently of Watson. Who knows how much of this is dressed up or the actual thing, but probably is it the real machine? Probably. I would say that because in the past ENIAC had they dressed it up for demonstration purposes with, like, I think it was half ping pong balls with numbers written on them and stuff to, like, demonstrate computations that they actually didn't really use when they were really using it. But all right, so I guess this is true. This is true. It involves lots of different fields. So philosophy is kind of what I was talking about a lot in neuroscience, I guess. Psychology has to do with how we figure things out. Knowledge-based AI, that KBA, that the one where the teaching assistant was in, was that kind of branch of AI. So also, like, understanding what it means to model things and how symbols are interpreted and that kind of thing, and like visual perception. That's all like where the neuroscience and the psychology would come in. Mathematics, especially probability and statistics. There's a lot of AI that uses probability and statistics, which is a way that the human brain doesn't really do intelligence. We have some capability in probability and statistics, but not like a computer does. And ours is really fallible. We think things are way more likely or less likely than they really are all the time. So statistics and probability are not our strong suit. And of course, more traditional math too, but really heavily relies on Bayesian, if you want to look that up, probabilistic calculations to figure out things. Machines can do that really well once they understand the rules. And so, of course, computer science kind of encompasses all this in a way. But biology, this is where genetic algorithms come in. So genetic algorithms are algorithms that are based on the way evolution it works. So you've got fitness functions, and then crossover breeding, where you like swap genes and then see what happens generation. So what you'll do is you'll create in code form what you might think of as genes in quotes, Let me try to describe one to you. Let me pause and I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. All right, this guy's name is Daniel Schiffman. He's a friend of a friend. I'd found out after I found out who he was. I found out who he was, by the way, from Dr. David Brown, who was a professor at Pellissippi long before I was ever here. Before I knew I would be here. I was at Codestock in Knoxville. He gave a presentation on using this guy's book called The Nature of Code in his classroom for this course that you're in. It used to be the textbook for this course. Maybe one day I'll bring it back. I'm not in charge of this course, so it's not for me to do, but I really liked it, and I taught it at another place where I taught. I used that book. Later on, I found out a friend actually married a guy that knows this guy. My friend, one of my best friends, married a guy that knows this guy. They both do what's called creative coding, like visual stuff. But my friend's husband is more on the like artistic side of it, and Daniel Schiffman here is more on the sort of computer science side of it, like AI sort of thing. He helped develop a programming language called Processing, which is built on top of Java. And this is the Java. And again, Java and JavaScript are not the same thing, but there is a JavaScript adaptation of Processing called P5JS, I think is what it's called. So what he's showing here, I think, is P5JS. But anyway, the example of genetic algorithms, here it is. So these rockets, in quotes, the win condition is they get to the target, and they have to find the path to the target. And the way it's usually shown in this example, I think it's got the horizontal bar that they kind of have to fly around. The genes are data in the code that determine which way they have, like, I don't know if it's a variable number of rockets or it's always the same number, like 5 rockets or something, but they're pointed in random directions. So the genes determine which direction the rockets are pointed in. And what you do, the fitness function is you let the rocket fly for a certain period of time, and then after that time's up, you see how close it is to the goal. And the ones that are closest to the goal get preferential treatment in breeding. So their genes are passed on with all the other rockets. So what you'll see is there are a whole host of rockets that are produced, and they fly in random directions, and they live for a certain amount of time, and then a new generation starts. And you'll see over time, each generation, the rockets get smarter and smarter about which way to go, because only the ones with the best fitness are the ones that are allowed to breed, and the other ones are kind of thrown out. And the way they breed is you just say, take half the things from this rocket, half the things from this rocket, maybe randomly select which half you take, and then combine them together to make a whole for the child rocket, and then see how it does as it fires the rockets. I think the genes are different directions and different firings, different times, or something like that. I think I've written this one before. I've got one I can show you too. That's not rockets, but so this guy is great. I love it. When I first saw him, he was really annoying to me for some reason, but I realized that I thought he was fake or something, but he's really not. He's very genuine. He's very interested and people learning and having fun with programming. I highly recommend, if you're interested in learning some programming, the Coding Train, this came along later, way after Nature of Code was a thing. But he's got a YouTube channel now called The Coding Train. I highly recommend it if you want to do some fun, easy. It's fairly easy, at least to get started stuff. Anyway. So it's just a sample. I don't know if you can hear him, but the smart rockets, I just want to show how they work. So you see how this is the population. Let's do this. This is the populations, and they're randomly going in different directions. He's got better looking rockets in some cases. This one doesn't have the barrier across the middle here. But as you see, each generation, on average, they tend to get, and now it's not 100% every time improvement, because again, there's an element of randomness. There's also a mutation you can add where you don't get the genes from both parents. You get mostly the genes from both parents, but every now and then you'll get like a random gene. So you can model all these aspects of evolution: fitness, mutation, selection, and the cross. There's a cross. I can't forget. It's crossover. That's what you call it, where you like have some of the genes from that one and some of the genes from the other, and maybe your own genes get kind of mixed up too on the way. That's what happens in real life, right? So you can see how with some just simple code, these get closer and closer. And here's the barrier. So introduce a barrier. Now they like run into it and die, but some of them figure out how to go around it by the end. And if you just look this up, look him up, and you'll find you can download and play with it, do your own thing with it. And this is just one example of genetic algorithms. They can be applied to many things. So you'll have a question at some point in one of the exams or something. I think it's genetic algorithms. What are they? They're algorithms, artificial intelligence algorithms that are based on how evolution works. In short, like fitness and selection and populations one after the other and that sort of thing. And it's really neat. He has also one where he does to be or not to be. He does. He shows you how that works. When you start with just random characters, but you apply a fitness function to it, to where the closer they are, like maybe if it gets a point, if it has the T in the right place and to be or not to be, and over time you can see how, and then you throw some mutation. And if you throw in too much mutation, if it's mutating all the time, it never gets any closer. But if it doesn't mutate at all, and you don't start with the letters you need, right? Say you randomly do a set of, because it's based on DNA, right? So if you have the DNA for TOBER, but like A, and you don't have, what's one I don't have in there? I had the B in there. Let's say you have one of the letters out. If you don't have that letter, then you'll never get it because you don't have that DNA. So that's where mutation comes in. So there's a fine balance there. It's really interesting. I encourage you to look at it. So that's where biology comes in. That was a tangent on how biology fits. Linguistics, that's natural language processing, is a big thing about talking to your computers now, with Google Home and that sort of thing. Understanding how syntax works in real languages that human beings speak, the grammar and all that. All right, next slide. Let's see. I always get horrified. I look down and I'm like, is it actually run? It's running, right? It's not paused. I didn't talk to nobody forever, did I? No. So, yeah, the Turing test is British math. I like this mathematician because at its heart, computer science is mathematics. And I like that they don't talk about Enigma and stuff here, because that is like, it was very important stuff, especially historically, but it wasn't why he was the most important. I want you to, anything you take away from this little video is that Alan Turing is important because he's the person who made computer science what it is. He's the Einstein. What Einstein was to physics, Alan Turing was to computer science. All right. So intelligent behavior. So these are like, let's see, learn from experiences. So this can be where you have a reward-based system. There's a robot that I made called Q Learning. That's actually not a robot. It's not a physical robot. It's an algorithm that figures out when to buy and sell stocks. So I've been messing around a little bit with Bitcoin lately, and I'm like, I need to dig that out and see how it goes. So it would have, like, if you imagine a robot going through a minefield, or a field that has like a maze, right, with hedges, but then some of the paths you go down have lava pits or whatever. So you have pluses and minuses that you reward it with as it tries out these different ways that it goes. And then the map itself can change over time as well. You can apply that problem to stocks about buying and selling based on what are called indicators, like something called Bollinger Bands, which is, what is it, plus or minus 2 standard deviations from the what's it called, the trailing average, the average over from day to day for the past like 20 days or whatever. If you cross that, if the average crosses that Bollinger Band, whether in the top or bottom, it's usually an indicator in the stock market, but not always, that it's the price is going to go up or down, that you're at a dip or a peak. I wrote a robot that would buy and sell stocks at the right times, but it was cooked data. Like in real life, there's a whole branch called quantitative analysis, quant for short. It's a financial thing. In the financial sphere, there are people working hard on this to try to figure out how to buy and sell stocks with artificial intelligence, and they have some success with it, but obviously not perfect, or everybody would know how to. It's almost like, would it work? Actually, if everybody knew how to do it, it wouldn't work. But I've never heard of anybody getting super rich off of it yet, or richer than the people who do it with their human brain, right? But it's really interesting. It was interesting that mine, even though it was kind of cooked data that it trained on, and then you put it in the wild, and it did fairly well. It bought and sold near the top and bottom. I got graphs somewhere I could show you. I might put them up on Brightspace. I don't have two hand right now, but it's really interesting stuff. Let me see if I actually find them. Oh shoot, I just checked my school GitHub account. It looks like I've been suspended, not for anything I did wrong, just because I'm no longer a student, but it took years, so I'm disappointed because I don't know if I backed that up. I've got it on a computer somewhere. So I'm definitely not on this computer, so I can't dig it up and show to you, but I'll dig it up later maybe. Anyway, it'll show like the graphs, and it shows where my robot bought and sold, and it buys at the dip and sells at the peak. It's really interesting. So that's the whole learn from experiences and applied knowledge from acquired experience. And I mean, some of these things are kind of hard to define. Handle complex situations. Fill in the missing gaps. Yeah, sure. Try to think of examples where you would show that. But one thing here might be, just off the top of my head, something called Kalman filter. So you, based on previous trends, statistically speaking, in like movement for like a robot or a driverless car, you can sort of project where the car will be in the future in relation to its environment. So maybe it's that sort of thing there. And that's a statistical method. Determine what's important, I guess. That's sort of implied in some of these other ones too. React quickly and correctly to a new situation. That's driverless cars and all kinds of robots. They have to be able to. And again, this uses a lot of a couple of things: perception, being able to process sensor data quickly, and react based on statistics, usually probability. Understand visual images. That's sort of like related to all this stuff. I do have another AI agent, an intelligent agent. You'll see that term used here, that solved Raven's progressive matrices. Let me show. Well, I just did an image search and I found a video from the class with Ashok Goel, Dr. Goel, who did the Jill Watson thing. So he's showing progressive matrices. So it's the intelligence test that's all visual. It's supposed to be more culturally fair or whatever. I wrote an agent that would solve it, not perfectly. If you could solve it right one, I would win what would I win? Not the Fields Medal, probably. That's math. Is there a Turing Award? I can't even remember what the awards are in computer science, but it did pretty well, and that's the problem with me using YouTube. Is if I'm signed into my account, you get to see all my interests, but there was nothing really crazy there, so it depends on your views, I guess. But so yeah, that would be understand visual images. I processed it in really weird algorithmic ways, not using computer vision necessarily, but what I would do is like rotate and transform the images and then compare them to each other to make decisions, which is more like there's a whole process of manipulate symbols. This comes from psychology too. Like, how do we decide what something symbolizes? For when it comes to Raven's progressive matrices, I never worked with it. Actually, it was optional at the beginning. Yeah. Wow, that scared me. With DoorDash. Okay. So I was saying, there's a English sort of language or sort of a mapping system that you could have used to do. I never did that one, but that's where you say this is above this or inside of this. So like the black circle is inside of a triangle or whatever, that would be processing and manipulating symbols. I did mine totally. The visual was like the advanced technique, but you could start with it if you wanted, and that's what I did. So I should probably go back and look how to do it with the manipulating symbols thing. But be creative and imaginative. I don't know what you mean by that. What does it mean for a machine to be creative? Whatever. Heuristics now, rules of thumb. One of the truths of computer science is a lot of problems are what's called intractable, which means they're not necessarily unsolvable, but they're not usefully solvable in a useful amount of time. Like if you wanted to find if you wanted to find what the best route between any two cities, not any two cities, that's pretty easy, it's a straight line, but the shortest path between 2 points is a straight line. But a trip over like 100 cities, what's the fastest way you can do that and go around in a circle? It's called the traveling salesman problem, if you're familiar with it. It's a classic what's called MP complete problem. You just have to try all the possibilities and then try all the possibilities, make a measurement of how long the trip took, and then compare those measurements. That last step's always very quick, but the trying all the possibilities is long. All the permutations of, first you start with city number 1, then 2, then 3, then up through 100, right? Then you start with 1, then go to 99, then go. I think that's factorial, right? 10 factorial. 100 factorial. Look up what 100 factorial is. It's a huge number. It takes way too long. So heuristics are ways of cutting corners and stuff to get like a good enough solution, but not necessarily the best solution. That's a heuristic rule of thumb. Heuristics are used a lot in AI to kind of cut, because if you did try to find the perfect solution, it would take forever if you use purely algorithmic processes to do it. But if you throw in some heuristics, then like the whole alpha beta pruning that I was talking about before with deep searches and planning all the possible moves from one chess move, there's lots of shortcuts you can take there where you don't necessarily find the best answer, but you can find the one that wins. That's heuristics. All right, actually, that's a good thing. Let me check something here. I think I've always meant to look this up, but I never did, neglected. So let's look it up now. By the way, I have a toolbar thing now where you can just type it in. So discover, find out, from heuriskein, to find out, discover in Greek. So, is it related to eureka? Heureka means I found it. Yeah, if you don't want to talk about eureka, I have found it. So okay, yeah, this comes from the same thing as heuristic. This is why I love looking up etymology. Like, okay, I'm sure somebody's there rolling their eyes. They don't think it's that amazing, but I think I just learned something amazing. And the reason why there's an H and not is because Greek didn't really have an H. That thing that looked like an H. It was the eta. You had a rough breathing mark you would put before some vowels, which is basically an H. You just didn't have a symbol for it. So I guess it was Heureka instead of Eureka. But anyway. So we created a imaginative. Yeah. So let's see. So there's some of the techniques or approaches you can take to AI, and is that it? Is that all the slides? I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. I want to talk about Q-learner and random trees, random forests, and neural networks. But it looks like we kind of skipped that. Now, expert systems. This is similar to what Dr. Goel was doing in his class with the Raven's progressive matrices, because that was knowledge-based AI. And knowledge-based AI is based on rules, I would say, if you want to put it in a total nutshell. You just write out the rules for the system, and it's more like teaching a computer how a human being would consciously try to solve a problem. So when I was talking about the Raven progressive matrices, what I would do for those puzzles is I would flip and maybe invert the colors. Because if you look at these puzzles, especially the more simple ones, which is the ones we started with, like this one, for instance. So if I took this one and then like removed all the color, if I compared this to this and I saw that if I removed all the color and I got this, then I would remove all the color from this to get the answer. Does that make sense? So you remove all the color, you turn all the white to black and the black to white. You have to figure out how some way to do the boundary right here. But for these two, you know, you get 3 should be the answer, I think. I hope. So square, black square, white square. And so I would do in this direction, but I'd also do this direction. So if this was a square that became the same color of circle, see, you can go this direction too. So I would write all these rules about how to flip and transform, do the mirror image upside down, change the color, see how much dark, how many dark pixels there are versus light pixels. The ones I was doing were black and white. We added color in the later ones when my agent didn't do as well on those. But that's just teaching it all the rule. Like, imagine it's a person, like, this is how you go about solving it. If you can teach a computer in a way the computer can understand those rules, those steps that you follow, that would be expert systems in a way. If you look at the so the knowledge base is like all these ways I can flip the different figures and what it means, how they match. I was always looking for matches in my I passed all the tests. I got A. So I didn't do the best, and my agent wasn't the smartest in the class, but it was smart enough. And here's what I was talking about, the if-then statement. If you flip this and get this, then you should flip this, and that gives you that. So decision trees are related to this. Decision trees are like the whole, like a 20 questions kind of thing. Is it animal, vegetable, mineral? And then like based on that, you go branches. You keep branching. Those are related to random trees, but I think that's enough about this stuff, the AI stuff. So robotics, I mean, you know what robotics is. Etymology, again, if I'm not mistaken, it's from the Czech word for slave. I'm pretty sure that's where robot comes from, and it comes directly from a Czech science fiction story, if I remember. A play, looks like. So the English translation, 1920 play, R.U.R. Rossum's Universal Robots by Karel Čapek, the Czech Robotnik forced worker from Robota. I don't know Czech, so forced labor, compulsory service, drudgery from. So forced work, basically slave, which is ironic because Slav means slave, and it's a Slavic. So anyway. So anyway, that's where robot comes from. So if you think of something that's forced to work, and we do it because it's a machine, it's not a human being, then you watch an episode of Star Trek, and Data has to save the things that are robots, but they have consciousness now, or whatever. Whatever, you get the idea. So that's robots. Ideally, the robots are going to be, they'll have AI built into them so they can make decisions. They'll have sensors. So if you think about the most important, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's the most probably thought about or talked about robot lately in the popular consciousness would be the driverless car. So a driverless car has to have sensors, and it has to take that data and make predictions about where it needs to be in the next millisecond as time goes on. It has to know where it's going, first of all. That's more of a knowledge-based thing. You know, here's the GPS coordinates where you're going to go. But using things like LiDAR and radar and what else? I'm trying to think of how LiDAR is bigger with the laser. The thing it's called LiDAR, a laser that circles around, and you pick up the feedback from the laser bouncing off things to get data about what's around you. Usually you use all kinds of different sensors, not just LiDAR. That's an important one though. And you interpret that using different heuristical probabilistic AI routines like common filters and particle filters, and it gets really complicated. But so robot would be something that can sense the environment, make decisions about what to do in the environment and then act them out, usually using servos. Servo would be like the muscles of the robot, if you want to compare it to a life form. So a life form hears and tastes and smells and sees. Obviously, that's a very important one for human beings anyway. Has something like in the nervous system, the brain, that takes that data and interprets it and then decides on an action to take and then acts out that action. And then when it acts out the action, it sees what the reaction in the environment is, and then it's a loop. There's a term, the cybernetic loop, that's what it's called for what I'm describing. That's what a robot is. Anything that can do that. And you can have sort of virtual robots built into computers, like my Q-learner robot that would buy and sell stocks based on previous data that it learned about what indicators, what it sensed in the market would be a good time to buy or sell. So there's a lot of overlap with robotics and AI. I don't know, vision systems. There's a whole branch of computer science about computer vision, about being able to notice patterns and, I guess, light data, if you want to think of it that way. Natural language processing, that's understanding spoken language, which is not necessarily logical. So, and that's just the grammar if you actually have it written out in symbols or whatever. And then you got the voice recognition on top of that, which is, that's more of a statistical thing. Usually you compare it to, you can sort of teach a program, an AI agent, how to understand voice stuff by saying, this is what you just heard is this word, and then you have somebody else say it, and that was the same word, and you do so many layers of that, probably maybe using some neural networks and that sort of thing, that it understands over time that all these different ways that it heard a certain sound means that word. So that's when accents, if it can understand my accent, it's doing pretty well. So voice recognition's come a long way in just the last decade, as far as I can tell. Learning systems, I'm not sure what they mean by this, but we don't have to know what every slide means. Neural networks are patterned after the way the mesh system of the brain, and it all has to do with complex mathematics, sigmoid functions, bias inputs, but in a very, like, a nutshell way, you have like an input side of it where you input the data, the sensing, that the starting place. Then you have this whole mesh thing that has different activations in between. So several layers of neurons, if you want to think about it, in a mesh, that the input signal can go over different ones. And then you have a series of outputs at the other end, which outputs what the thing actually does. And the magic happens all in the middle there. And it's kind of hard for a human being you can set up the neural network and not exactly know how it figures out what it does. But if you think about when you learn something or you memorize something, you're strengthening certain pathways in your brain over and cutting other ones loose that weaken. So there's strong ones and weak paths in your brain that are reinforced by your learning, what you're being input, and how the output feeds back into that. There's this whole feedback, the cybernetic loop in a way too. That will strengthen certain pathways, and other ones will become less strong based on different inputs and outputs. That's what a neural network is in a very rough, not formally mathematical way. So again, the contention of Roger Penrose that I talked about earlier, that guy, is that will never result in consciousness. Even though it's kind of based on how our brains sort of work. It's a very simplified version of how our brain works. Now, that's not to say you can't create consciousness. If you created an artificial brain that works the same way a brain does, and we're making the assumption that somehow consciousness arises out of the human brain, leaving aside religious beliefs and stuff. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not going to fight about that either way. I mean, could very well be just like magical religious stuff that makes you conscious, right? I don't know. I'm not that arrogant to say that I know. But if you're going to try to figure it out scientifically, and you kind of make the assumption that the human brain produces consciousness somehow, then if you can make an artificial brain out of other, you take a bunch of things and put them together in the same way, then you could, in theory, make something conscious. It's just that Roger Penrose's contention is that it's not algorithmic steps that creates the consciousness alone. It's not the things, that's not the way the Turing machine's designed, and therefore your computers are designed, that will make consciousness emerge. It has to be some other combination of things. It gets really, if you're interested in this, again, read The Emperor's New Mind. It's a very dense book, but it's very interesting too. All right, so neural networks, there's some software you can download. This genetic algorithm, again, I went over that in detail. Intelligent agent was what I was talking about, the thing that, my thing where I taught it how to solve the RPMs, or Raven's progressive matrices. You have an intelligent agent. I usually have it in this class. I haven't turned it on yet, where it just checks to see if you've logged in a week, and if you haven't, sends you an email. That's an example of an intelligent agent. Anyway. Multimedia, virtual reality. Let's see you guys probably know as much or more about multimedia than I do, so we'll skip over that. But in virtual reality, this is all, I'm not going to talk about, because you guys know a lot about VR as well. What I do want to say about it is, though, that if you're still kind of new, this is like a new student course in a way. The library has a nice VR setup if you want to go. It has some fun game. I think it has this lightsaber one, whatever it's, I forget what it's called. I think they have that one, but they also have more educational stuff too. It's really cool. And usually when we're on campus, we can schedule the library people to come by. They'll bring the mobile set and set it up in the classroom, and you guys get to like try it out. But unfortunately, we don't have that capability when we're doing stuff online. Sorry. So it's all like VR stuff. And I really think that's it. Augmented reality, of course, is like when you have like a filter on top of the world, usually visual, which if you play Pokemon Go, you know what that looks like. And usually you turn it off if you play it. Like, it's been a while since, but it looks like Pikachu's in your house. That's augmented reality. But it's also like what Darth Vader sees in his visor, right? He can see information about his environment overlaid on top, or Google Glass, which reminds me, Ashek Goel was my knowledge-based AI professor, but this was my AI like the regular AI class professor, Thad Starner. He was big into what's he call them? The augmentation of the human body stuff. So he was really big into Google Glass early on, but like other stuff too. So these are like young. This is what he was young, I guess. I don't know what he's a goofball. Check out some of his videos. He goes to Dragon Con, which makes him pretty cool in my book. But I mean, it is in Atlanta, but not all the professors go to Dragon Con. But yeah, this is one of my, oh, look, he's not got Google Glass on in this one. I want to say in the videos he made for class, he always had this thing on. Maybe not. But we have 2 litter mates. They're going to be 6 in April, and their mother was a rescue from Onada. It's a long story, but she would howl at sirens and taught them to do it, and we thought it was cute. So we never made them not do it. Now they do it every time there's a siren. Saturday night. So, of course, there's going to be sirens. But it's good because I was on a tangent with Dr. Starner. Dr. Starner. And getting back to some more AI stuff. This is genetic algorithm. This is one. It's also based on stuff that I keep calling him Daniel Schiffman did. I don't know why I can't blame. Again, I got a couple of bites while I had to pause for the howling, so my blood sugar might come up here in a second. But he had a thing called bloops, and the idea was that you had these creatures called bloops, and they have genes, and they age over time and get bigger. If they don't get food, so I think when they die, they deposit. Hush brownie. They deposit food, but if they don't eat in enough soon enough time, I think they die. But what I did, I had to do this for like, I actually took one of his mooks a while back, and we had to write our own genetic algorithms and stuff for one of the labs. So I based mine on bloops. I took that code, which you're allowed to do. Just give credit for it. But what I did is I tried to model the whole. And this is a very unsophisticated, just starting model of it. It's not something, not in any way meant to be like informative, really, at least beyond the very basics. But the whole hypothesis that blue eyes were a random mutation as soon as what 5,000 years ago, something like that. But they had a heavy sexual selection, so people really liked them, and they got more mates, and it spread. It's still this, aside from really weird colors like, I always want to say green. Green's not that weird, but it's less frequent than blue, I think. And like solid black, those really dark colors, I think those are very rare. But for the most, blue's still very rare, but it still spread like quite quickly from how far back that it first appeared. Probably appeared multiple times, actually, to be honest, but I don't know if they know exactly. So what I did is I have genes, and I've been told it's not this simple in real life, but you learn it in high school, the Punnett square, right? Where you have brown is dominant over blue, which is recessive. So you can carry blue-eyed genes, but if you don't have two recessive blue-eyed gene, what are they called, alleles in your genotype, then the phenotype won't be brown. Blue, it'll still be brown. So you have to get both recessive. So I modeled the Punnett square in my genes here. So all of these are either two brown genes for, like, think of them as eyes for the color, or a brown and a blue recessive. And I have it starts out as just brown eyes, or brown bodies in this case, brown circles. And there's no blue genes at all. Well, no. Levi's are not. There's no genes for blue coloration at all. There's a very small chance each generation that a blue-eye gene will appear, and it'll be recessive, and you won't be able to see it because it'll be recessive. But then there's a small chance that every so often these things are mating. They don't have to be next to each other in mine. They're just any two random ones will be selected to mate with each other. In the case where you get the two blue-eyed genes, you'll actually see blue. The sirens are back. This is what happens. If you read the news for West Knoxville on Saturday night, you might know what this is all about. All right, so you can see I've got some blue things here now, because so what happens is once you get one that's actually blue to your eye, visually blue, it's appearing blue here, it will have a very slight advantage in being selected to mate. So, and then over time, you just see how it propagates. Sometimes they'll like die out slowly. Sometimes they'll be like, as they are now, there's a few here and there. Sometimes they'll take over. Like the whole thing will be blue, and the brown ones are gone after a while. It's amazing to see how it varies. But it usually takes a while. Sometimes a blue one will appear right away just by chance. But again, it's a small chance that a blue gene appears, and it's a small chance that one carrying a blue gene will mate with somebody else with a blue gene. And then after that, when there is a blue one, this guy has a better chance of having a mate than any of the other ones that are not blue. And then you just see how they do over time. There's more going on in this, by the way, besides the blue thing. There's also the big ones move slower but cover more area. So is that better for getting food than moving really quickly? Usually it's a medium size, so it moves fairly quickly, but it's still big. That sort of like the equilibrium for being the most fit. The very small, fast ones don't don't do as well, and the really big ones don't do as well. But there's a lot going on here. This is on the well, I can't actually show it here. Hold on, I might be able to find it. So it's true that for this class and a couple other classes, you used to get web space for C. If you take CISP 1010, you'll get this Linux account. It used to be for 1301 you did, but not anymore for whatever reason. That's something else I'd like to bring back. But on that account, you got web space. So this is how P5JS, I was telling you about that earlier. Again, Daniel Schiffman kind of thing. It's been a while since I looked at this code, so I'm not even sure I'll understand it, even though I wrote it. This is the true thing about programming. Let's actually look at DNA. That might show you the genetic algorithm components. So I've got good comments. Thank you, past Chris. So the alleles are determined. They're determined by taking the random. Okay, so RD. I can't leave that there. By taking a random of the two genes, that's not English. Is this English? Taking a random sampling of the two genes from the father paired with a random selection of the two genes from the mother. So this is how reproduction happens. So it's really just an array. It's an array of genes is what the child is. So, and there's two alleles, 0 and 1, index 0 and index 1. And then you return the new DNA of the child. So then I've got mutation, a small chance of recessive B gene, so the lowercase b as opposed to the uppercase b. Uppercase b is brown, lowercase is blue, and blue is recessive. So this is just a function, I call it mutate, that randomly, so random 1 is less than m. What's m? Function m. I have to see how this is all passed, but these are the genes. This is all there are to the genes. It's just an array. With 2 positions, I think. So there's that component. Environment. This is like, okay. So there's the whole population, and then there's another. So these are 2 arrays. There's an array of all the things you saw, the browns and blue ones. And then there's another array called the mating pool, and some of those will get chosen to be in the mating pool. And once they've been chosen, there's like the whole breeding ceremony, I guess. The ones in the mating pool reproduce, and the ones that are not chosen for it don't pass on their genes. And that's where the fitness function comes in. So this might be my fix. That's a standard term for genetic algorithms, the fitness function. This might be my fitness function called selection. Here it is. Fitness is equal to this population. Calc fitness. So what's calc fitness? But calc fitness is a way of determining whether something's fit enough to be chosen to reproduce. So again, this is unsophisticated. Even if what I was doing was sophisticated, this code would be unsophisticated. But where is the fitness? It might be in a different file. Search. Hold on. If it's been a while since I've used calc fitness, that's what I want. Next. Yeah, it's in a different file. So you can see it's spread out over several files, and I won't belabor this too much. Maybe just look at bloop. The original was called BLOOP. It was a bloop, and then I made it. It's a pun, right? Because yeah, I've got that here in the. I've got that here in the comments, so I could share this code maybe with people if they wanted to play with it. If you know any JavaScript, this is basically JavaScript, so. So yeah, eye color is determined by the phenotype, and I don't know where the calc fitness is, but there's some stuff about movement in here that's a whole separate matter. The whole how they randomly move around. Looks like the fitness factor is just a factor used in calculating the chance to have a slot in the mating pool. In this scenario, a higher value phenotype works against your chances. So the higher, like I decided that I guess higher means more brown, right? So the lower your phenotype value is, the more blue you have. I just like a simple mapping probably of the fact that the blue is 0 and the browns are 1 or something. I don't know exactly what I did, but that sounds like it. But that would be the fitness factor, the fitness function. So anyway, maybe I'll put a link to this so you can take a look at it if you want and mess around with it. Again, like you'll get different results every time you run it because it is somewhat based on chance, as you can see. Just like evolution, there is a chance factor. It's not totally chance. Evolution's not totally chance, but there is sometimes a heavy element of chance in it. Sorry, I couldn't resist taking a bite. I'm starving. I don't know how long to show this running, but I was hoping to like show the blue stuff turn up again, but I think I'll just leave it here because it does take a while sometimes. And I think this is the end of the video because we're a little over an hour and this is a little too much. I just kind of wanted to talk about, there's a blue right there. I just wanted to talk about some aspects of AI that I'm familiar with from tacit knowledge. If you look in your slides, there's something called tacit knowledge. That's what I'm using here when I talk about this. So, you know, this is an older slide bank. Never mind. I was on the wrong one. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, we were nearly all the way through this one. So, if you have any questions, let me know.